right, good morning. So I'm going to get you ready for your Creating Theories About Character test. I'm going to do this just by starting to review all the lessons that we've done. When we take the test, which will be on Tuesday, you'll be writing 2 paragraphs about your character from your independent reading book using the lessons and the notes in your reading journal that we've done so far. You are going to be able to use the book that you're reading and your reading journal and notes while you take the test. And you're just going to form those notes into 2 paragraphs. So I thought I would just review the different mini lessons that we had about creating theories about characters, because you'll be writing about each of these mini lessons when you write about your character. So first we looked at, which I have Wing It On for my nails, they're supposed to be like butterflies. We have characters are complicated and show more than one trait. Characters have less likable sides. Characters reveal themselves over time. Characters react differently to different pressures. And some character traits matter more than others. Now, I do want you to take a look at the rubric that we're going to be using for your test, just so you have an idea of what you're going to be graded on. I will go over a 4 exceeds is like an A, a 3 meets is a B, a 2 partially meets is like a C or a D, and a 1 does not meet is an E or failing. So, in order to get a 3, you need to explain 2 or more character traits with detailed evidence. If you were going to get a 4, it would look more like maybe 3 character traits, or maybe really detailed examples from the story. For less likable traits, for a 3, explains at least 1 less likable trait with detailed evidence. And this could be one of the traits that you decide to talk about, but you would need to mention that it's a less likable trait. Then revealing traits over time explains how a character changes at least once in the story with evidence. Character pressures explains at least 1 pressure that a character experiences in detail. And importance of traits explains how 1 character trait is more important than the other. And again, these could be in your traits that you do, but you would want to say, this character trait explains my character the most. Or this character trait shows a character versus character pressure. So this is your rubric, and you will have the rubric available to you when you take the test. So I'm going to give you an example from Among the Hidden. It says quiz here, but it's actually test. I'm going to read it out loud, and then we're going to take a look at it, kind of highlighting some things or circling some things so that you really have an idea of what I'm looking for. So, in the beginning of Among the Hidden, Luke was a very obedient child that follows all the rules. Once the trees came down, he followed his mother's order to hide in the house because he was a 3rd child. He also follows his dad's orders to stay hidden in his attic room and not go into the kitchen or dining room because someone might see his reflection in the window. In my opinion, this is one of his least likable traits. I just want to scream at him to break some rules. Luke is also very cautious. I think this is the best trait to describe him in the beginning of the story. He plans his trip to Jen's house for months when he decides to sneak out. Then, on the day of his trip, he counts the people from the neighborhood 5 times before leaving the house. Luke is also constantly questioning his place in the world. He wonders if he should exist because his food could go to someone who is legal. This is a great example of his low self-esteem. And this is an example of a character versus self-pressure. Overall, Luke really is struggling at the beginning of the story. So I'm going to take this out and I'm going to highlight the traits. So if you notice, I said he was obedient. And you want to notice I'm using traits, this isn't the best highlighter, I'm sorry, instead of emotions. And I gave the example for obedient, that he follows his mother's order to hide in the house. He follows his dad's orders to stay hidden in the room and not go into the kitchen or dining room because someone might see his reflection. And then I did say, which I'm going to circle here, that this was a least likable trait. So here I have 1 least likable trait. Obedient is the trait, one of the traits I mentioned, because characters are complicated, and then the evidence to back it up. Then I talk about how he's cautious. So there's another trait. And I use the example of him planning his trip to Jen's house for months to sneak out, and then counting the people of the neighborhood 5 times before leaving the house. Then I talked about how he has low self-esteem, and I kind of gave the evidence for low self-esteem before, where should his food go to someone that's legal, and this low self-esteem I also said, let me get one more color out, was a character versus self-pressure. So already using the rubric, I have more than one trait, I have a less likable trait, and I looked at a character pressure. And I believe I said that cautious is the trait that I thought could describe him the most. So let's see. Yes, this is the best trait to describe him, being cautious. So if we look back at the rubric, not to give you a headache, I've also looked at importance of traits. Now the second paragraph is really going to focus on your character change. So I'm going to read this out loud. As the story continues, Luke becomes rebellious and breaks the rules to hide. Because Mom got a job and leaves him alone a lot, he decides to risk a run over the sports family's house to see if there's a third child hiding. This is an example of character. I said character versus character, but I actually think, let's change this, character versus nature, because his house feels like a prison, and I think I wrote that down there. So again, I have rebellious as my trait. My evidence is that he decides to risk a run over to the sports family's house, and I talked about a pressure, how it was a character versus nature pressure. These pressures cause him to act in a way that he wouldn't normally and turned him into a rule breaker. After reaching his house, he finds the door locked and ignores his cautious nature. He becomes reckless and punches his way through the screen door. So again, I've got my trait of reckless. Reckless. And then I have my evidence here of how he finds the door locked and punches his way through the screen door. So here I'm showing how Luke is changing, becoming rebellious, and reckless instead of cautious and obedient up here. Luke's confidence also starts to build when he thinks about how others in his family would react to having to hide. He feels he would be the best at hiding and starts to feel proud. Therefore, Luke is becoming more daring and a bit more confident. So again, we have confidence as a trait. And the evidence would be about how he feels that he would be the best at handling how to hide. So if we look at the rubric again, in this paragraph, I've shown how Luke reveals himself over time with some different traits and another pressure. And therefore, I have met, maybe even exceeded, because I had a couple examples, all of the boxes on the rubric. So when we take our test on Tuesday, like I said before, you'll be able to use your notebook, your book, any sheets that I handed out. So I handed a sheet out or attached a sheet to Google Classroom about character traits, about traits versus emotions, about character pressures. You may use any of those things, and it's going to be about 2 paragraphs, somewhat like mine, the beginning of the story and then the end of the story. And you'll want to make sure you check off all of these boxes. The rubric will also be available to you. So what I'd like you to do with the rest of class, which is about 20 minutes, is I'd like you to plan for your test. Read through your notes. Make sure you have pressures or you have important traits or less likable traits on your character that you've been taking notes of on your book so that you can be ready to go on Tuesday. If you have time left over after that, feel free to read because I'm still going to be taking reading goals. So tomorrow I'll be taking Cohort B's reading goals and I'll have a space for that. And we'll meet again like we did today to do the read aloud, live streaming, and practice the live streaming. All right, have a great day.